In this week's episode of Property of the Week, we are going to take a look at who the heck is buying these dang reports from PropertyLens. Stay tuned. Learn what they've already learned right after this. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, ships at sea, it is time for another episode of Property of the Week with PropertyLens. As always, for those of you who don't know, my name is Bob Frady, CEO and co-founder of PropertyLens. With me, as always,
John Siegman, president and co-founder of PropertyLens.
So people ask me all the time, like, is this report right for me? And the answer is, well, if you're buying a house, of course it's right for you. But let's take a look at all the people, or a sample of all the people who've ordered reports from PropertyLens and say, what kind of houses are they looking at? Is this just a tool for the wealthy? Is this, something for, anybody? Or what's the data telling us about who's buying this report? So I thought we'd walk through it, talk about it, and see where we go. What do you think?
I think that'll be very interesting. Can't wait to find out.
So I didn't prepare John for this. So his reactions will be Siegman-esque, straight off the cuff.
Just a mushroom kept in the dark.
We looked at a sample. I pulled a random sample of about 900 reports. They cover 47 different states, and we get a lot of data. So the top 5 states, in terms of where people are coming from, are, any guesses?
Yes. California, Texas, New York, Illinois, and Washington.
You got 3 out of the 5. California is number 1. Texas is number 2. Florida is number 3. Colorado, number 4. And Illinois is number 5. So those 5 make up 30, 45, 60% of our visitors. So there's a lot of interest from these areas. There's 2 reasons for that.
The cost of housing in those areas, and the fact that those are some of the most risky states out there.
You got one of the 2 correct. Your second answer is absolutely correct. One I'll give you half credit for. But the real reason is because that's where the people live.
Well, that's why I picked the states that I did.
These states have gnarly weather. If you go down the list a little bit more, you get Missouri, you get Ohio, you get Oklahoma, New Jersey. They all have gnarly weather. That's what we thought, that people who have really interesting weather patterns would be more interested. The second thing that we can tell you, any idea what you think the median property value is that people have run through the site?
Well, California's expensive. Illinois up by Chicago is pretty expensive. I'm going to say, though, lots of other places are probably fine. Median is $400,000.
The median is $525,000, which is, pretty average for most places. What's interesting is that the average is actually much higher than that because we have some really huge properties that people look at, and then we have fewer small things that people look at. Median listing price was $525,000. The median year built was 1996, so they're all about 30 years old right now. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, $500K. It's Americana. That's who's buying this stuff.
So pretty much anybody.
Yeah, it's not. Listen, we certainly have our share of people who look at really expensive houses, and we certainly have our share of people who look at bargain properties. But for the most part, it's everybody. It's as America cross section as you can get.
Very apple pie.
Okay, so now we'll move on to some of the risks that people are seeing when they buy a PropertyLens report. And what's interesting is that crime is a little bit higher than I had expected. In our crime data set, 11.5% are Fs for crime.
Wow.
Which is surprising. I didn't think it would be that high. Nationally, percentage of F crime rates is about 5%, but a little bit higher risk than average. But what's really interesting about this crime data is as you move out, the risk drops. So it paints a picture that, yeah, people are concerned about crime, the properties that they're looking at, with good reason. But they tend to be in areas that aren't necessarily humongously dangerous, but they might have pockets where they're a little bit less safe than unsafe, which I thought was really the most interesting thing about this. John, any thoughts on that?
Crime certainly is a major consideration, especially if you're buying in an area that you don't really know. And when you look at the realty rules, realtors cannot tell you about crime because it's considered redlining.
Yeah.
So unless there are bars on the windows, you're pretty much on your own for finding out that information.
Mm-hmm. And they won't tell you that because they can't. Now they might direct you to some places where you can look it up, but why not have it when you walk in the door? That was quite the surprise for me. And the interesting part was when you look at the subsegments of crime, the one that pops out the most is aggravated assaults. Why all assaults aren't aggravated, I don't understand. It just seems like it's redundant. Like this was a title that was developed by the Department of Redundancy Department. It's like 11% have F scores for aggravated assault. A lot of times that occurs where there's a lot of bars and a lot of coastal areas. So because a lot of coastal areas have a lot of bars. So without even knowing what the specific addresses are here, these might be a little more
transient.
Yeah, than not. So that was fairly interesting. And then we cut over to natural hazards. Natural hazards are regional. It's like, because you're not going to get wildfire risk in Ohio, nearly the same as you are in parts of Colorado and California. And a lot of what we look at in Colorado and California are people who are exposed to wildfire risk because the risk is much higher there versus, cold weather. You're going to get here in Minneapolis, but you're not necessarily going to get there in San Diego. The thing that was really interesting was flood. If you look at riverine flooding scores, 27% of the homes, 1 in 4, just a little bit over 1 in 4, had an elevated risk of flood at their property, whether or not they were in a FEMA flood zone. So we give you both. We'll give you what FEMA says the flood zone is, that's a required insurance, and then we'll tell you maybe you might want to get some flood insurance on here because a lot of places flood outside of the flood zone.
It's bad. You can take that from a hazard expert, oddly enough. Flood is definitely should be a major concern. And part of the reason that we got into this is, if you've paid any attention to previous webinars, podcasts, whatever these things are, that, one of Bob's friends bought a house in Houston, not in the flood zone. She was in the 500-year flood zone, told her to go get flood insurance. And then what happened 6 months later? Hurricane Harvey. And what came to us? Picture, water halfway up the front door with the quote, "We are so glad we listened to you guys. We're the only ones in our neighborhood with flood insurance."
Yep. Listen, floods
You
pains.
don't want to be caught short.
Nope.
And a 500-year zone, first of all, your realtor doesn't know where the flood lines are drawn. And they're probably not going to tell you, even if they did know. So you got to go find out. And if you're not in a flood zone, there's no insurance that's required for the mortgage. But if you're really close, water doesn't know where the lines are drawn, right? So you need to definitely take the precautions, and we tell you about that. We also tell you if neither a 100 or a 500-year flood zone apply, but coastal flooding or riverine flooding does, you might just want to spend a little bit extra every year and just sleep a little better. Because it's cheap at that point.
So what's interesting is if you look at our riverine flooding, 27% of the properties are in a D or an F zone, an elevated risk zone. And then if you add in coastal flood, that's another 3%. So you're looking at 30% of and there might be some that have a little bit of an overlap because you got the shoreline, you got rivers. but let's just say it's 28%, just for giggles. If you look at actual FEMA flood zones, only 5% of those are in 100-year flood zones, and 4% are in 500-year flood zones. So together, it represents 9% of our households. So people are massively overexposed to a flood peril, even though FEMA says they're not. Because when you measure the intensity of water from rivers that may or may not be in zones, it really exposes the limited nature of FEMA flood zones. Because half of those risks occur outside of FEMA flood zones. I thought that was super interesting. If we tell you to get in flood insurance, probably not a bad idea. One of the things that I thought was interesting is that how many properties do you think have D or an F mold exposure on a percentage basis?
40.
You are exactly almost right. I'm going to give it to you because it's 39.9% of properties have an elevated risk of mold. And again, if you've watched the show before, this guy bought a house with mold exposure that I did not know about and then had to remediate that stuff 2 years after I bought the house. Listen, any place could get mold if you just get the right circumstances, but some places get it way more than others. The D and F zones should be an alert to you to say, make sure you do as much as you can to check for mold before you either buy or move into a property.
Yep.
Okay, how about radon?
Radon is a natural gas that can definitely mess up your life and cause a number of diseases. And there's a large swath of the country that definitely has exposure. I'm going to say 48%.
Oh, you're a little high on that one. It's 28%. In almost all states, radon's not a required disclosure. And even when it is required, it's not really disclosed all that well because people go, I don't know. So there you go. I've lived in this house 20 years. I don't know whether there's radon exposure. So
if you've been there 20 years, do you have lung cancer, sir, and not smoke?
That's an acceptable answer in the world of real estate disclosures.
That would be your follow-up question.
You know, the interesting thing about this is that 11% of our customers had snow load as an F risk. It's like, that's very interesting. And again, that's what you get Colorado.
Well, Colorado, Minnesota.
Yeah.
There's plenty of places that get a lot of snow.
Yep.
So 11%, that's not out of character.
And everything else was in line with what you would expect. You're expecting that you're going to have tornadoes in the Midwest and the Southeast, and that shows as a risk there. And you're not expecting that in California. You're expecting earthquakes in California, but not necessarily in, say, Virginia or Illinois. So there's a lot of expected behaviors when it comes to perils. Now, taking a whole state and saying, well, the whole state's this way is just the wrong way to look at things. You want to look at the property because there's good areas in California that have no wildfire risk or little to no wildfire risk. And there are some that have very obvious levels of wildfire risk. So then we go over to environmental grades. One of the things that we see that I thought was interesting is that 4.7% of the properties that were pulled have sinkhole risk. That means there's been a sinkhole nearby.
Well, 32 states can get a sinkhole, so...
Exactly.
They're
and
around.
If yours is one of them and your house falls into the ground, it might not be covered, and you might die.
Yeah, I think the latter part there is probably more concerning than the not covered, but that's just me.
One of the variables that was really interesting was soil. What percent of properties do you think have a D or an F for soil runoff?
30%.
51.9%, more than half. Now, that's where there's a grade that's reported because we don't have soil data for everywhere. But where there's a grade that's reported, 50% have elevated risk of soil runoff. And what does that mean, John Siegman?
Well, it means your neighbors aren't going to be very happy with you, for starters, because all of your rainwater is going to end up on their property.
Yep.
But it also means that you're going to have a very tough time growing things because the water doesn't necessarily sink in. You're probably not going to be digging a basement because it indicates that the soil is pretty hard. There's a lot of things that it indicates.
To me, it says one thing: check your foundations. When people go to look at houses, they walk around the inside because they're trying to decide whether they can live in it, but they don't walk around the outside. But most of the danger from your house, well, probably half the danger in your house, comes from the outside. So you want to spend some time walking around, see if you can determine where the water flows. Is water coming to your house? Is water going away from your house? Is it going to your neighbor's yard, or is your neighbor's yard coming into you? Those are the kind of things you want to take a look at. And in areas where you have unstable soil, 50%, that's just crazy. Okay, so when we look at neighborhood grades, we had one really interesting thing stick out that tells us a lot about our customers. What percent of our customers do you think have an F for public transit scores?
72.
You are so close. 79%. That's crazy. So what that tells us is that a lot of these houses that we're looking at are not necessarily in the center of the city. They're more on the exurbs of the city.
It's suburbia.
Suburbia plus, because
Suburbia
you don't
plus.
have straight great transit networks. And as a result, your walk score is not very good in most of those places. I thought that was super interesting. It's like, wow, that sticks out like a sore thumb. So of the communities that people are moving into, how many have bad natural disaster resilience, either a D or an F?
67.
You're too unfair to local governments. It's 40.3%. 4 houses in 10 from people who buy PropertyLens reports are in areas where the local government isn't very good at disaster resilience. And in the event there's a disaster, you need to be aware that the cavalry ain't coming for the most part in those areas, because there isn't a lot of cavalry to go around. Think your realtor's going to tell you that? No, they're not going to tell you that at all.
You see poor disaster resilience.
Where's that?
In places that don't really have them. So, for example, if you look up and down California, most of the cities here score very poorly for disaster resilience.
True.
Because other than wildfires and an occasional earthquake, there's really nothing to respond to.
Yeah. Get out, or just be careful, because your city's not going to be able to help you. Whether it's a road network or the amount of infrastructure, and usually a lot of it is driven by road network. If you've got crazy road networks, like in the Palisades, like in Paradise in California, that don't lend themselves to massive evacuation of people, it's just nuts. We've talked a lot about PFAS. And what's PFAS? PFAS, what's it stand for, John?
Polyfluoroalkylides.
And what are they?
They're the forever plastic.
That's right. And so they use it in all sorts of different things to help put out fires, and it lasts forever and goes into the groundwater. What percent of properties purchased by PropertyLens customers have a D or an F for PFAS?
92%.
Not quite that high. Gosh, that's your pessimistic. Come on, man. It is 68.3%. 2 houses in 3. It's high. So if you're on a city sewer system, the easiest thing to do with an elevated PFAS reading is just to ask the local utility, hey, what are you doing to correct for this? But if you're on a well water, then you got bigger problems than if you don't ask about this. And that is something, think your realtor's going to tell you?
No.
Because your realtor's going to be like me, where they can't even see it right. They'll call it PFAS. And it's like, no, it's PFAS. It's a plural. So there we go. And then one interesting thing, 5.2% of properties have arsenic in the groundwater. Like, former manufacturing areas have a lot of arsenic in the groundwater. And you need to be aware of this. So, because the second leading cause of bladder cancer in Massachusetts was groundwater arsenic. People get these wells, they think that this is great water, it's pure, it's from the ground. That arsenic sitting in there, whether it's naturally occurring or from manufacturing, it gets right in your system. It's a main line in, there's no filtration. So it's something you want to be aware of. I think that's the summary of what we've got there, John.
Well, I think our customers are very knowledgeable about what goes on around the properties they're purchasing. It's an interesting look at why you need a PropertyLens report.
The stuff about the roof condition is great. The stuff about all the other things are great. But there's a lot else that goes on that no one's ever going to tell you. And for the same price that you would pay to find out the roof condition and the system ages and the overall score, we can tell you. So it is interesting, to say the least, at least to me, because I love data. Any final thoughts there, John?
If you haven't,
click the subscribe button. It makes us feel better about ourselves. So for this week's episode of Property of the Week from PropertyLens, I'm Bob Frady.
I'm John Siegman.
Until next time.